So yesterday I played Clair Obscure Expedition 33 for quite some time, and so far it has truly exceeded my expectations. So today I'll cover my thoughts based on what I've discovered so far, such as the performance of it on the Steam Deck, as well as the character development, the gameplays, and whatnot. So without further ado, let's check it out. So when playing Clair Obscure Expedition 33, I set my Steam Deck OLED at a 45 frames per second frame limit cap with 90 Hz. Now, as far as the game goes, I just went with the default settings because I was just really excited to really get into Clair Obscure Expedition 33, and I will say this, I did not expect it to run as well compared to the demos that I saw before I made the before you buy guide for Clair Obscure Expedition 33. Now, as I go about roaming around in town, I get a solid 45 FPS for a lot of the time, though sometimes there are some dips that it gets into the 30s FPS, but at the same time, it wasn't something that is really a big hindrance. I did not feel there was any major lag, major instability, or anything. It was something in which I still find really satisfying to go around town, and it wasn't too much of a problem, even though for some people it may be an issue. Now, as far as the cutscenes goes, it will drop into a solid 30 FPS, though even with that as well, there will be dips where it will go to 27 to 29 FPS, quickly pick up to 30, and sometimes it will go up a little bit. It will go to 31 to 32 FPS, but for the most part, it's still pretty good at staying at a solid 30 FPS during the cutscenes. So that is something that is really stable in the cutscenes, I will say. I mean, are there any optimization work that needs to be put in? Sure, there are some works that could be done to make the game a bit better in the cutscenes as well as roaming around town, but for the most part, I am pretty much impressed because in case you didn't watch the before you buy guide for Clair Obscure Expedition 33, I mentioned that there were other people who played the demo, and during the demo, there were constant drops kind of between the, mid to high 20s and also getting it to the 30s. It's just barely like that. There is no such thing as in the 40s, at least from my research. So I'm really glad that it has been better than I expected, because I did not expect it. I expected to be much lower in frame rates. Now, as far as going into battle, that is another thing that I need to address, okay? When you go around into battle, sometimes it will linger around the 40s FPS, sometimes it will go into the high 30 FPS. It fluctuates. There are constant dips. It will go linger in the 40s, go into the 30s. I mean, thanks for Matthew for pointing it out in the community post about saying that he really wished that there was more optimization in regards to Clair Obscure Expedition 33 with the battles, and I can totally agree with that, because at the end of the day, I will say this, games that can run at a high FPS, does it make the game more smooth? Sure, it does. But at the same time, for me, what I care more about, what I think is the most important thing for a game to be stable, is that if it can run at a solid frames per second, something that is very solid, because when you have a game that runs at a solid FPS, it just runs very smooth. There is no choppiness whatsoever. So that is something in which it is really important to note. And yeah, I will say this, is that it is also rough on the edges while you're going into battle, because 40s FPS sometimes fluctuating to the 30s FPS and then picking up to the 40s FPS. It really causes some part of the battles to be a bit choppy, not gonna lie, but at the same time, it's not a make or break experience for me. I still had a lot of fun with it. I didn't have any issues with the battle. I didn't have any issues to implement the certain buttons that I want to do with the characters in the battle, nor do I have any problems while roaming around in this beautiful terrain. I didn't have any problems with that, so that is something that is really good to note. Now, as far as battery life goes with Clair Obscure Expedition 33 on the Steam Deck, I'm happy to say that you can play the game for 3 hours straight before having to recharge it. It is a game in which it will be really great even on a road trip, because it will have adequate amount of time before you will have to recharge for the game. Now, as far as whether or not there are any bugs in Clair Obscure Expedition 33 in which I discovered so far, and I will say, unfortunately, there is. One major bug that I found was when I finished the prologue of the game and went on with the last cutscene before you actually go on the expedition. And what I noticed is that as I play through the last cutscene of the prologue and finish the cutscene, the game just suddenly crashes and I'm back on the Steam Deck homepage. Now, I double checked it, and to make sure sure and replayed the cutscene, and sure enough, once I finished playing the cutscene all the way to the end, it crashed again. So it is safe to say that there is a bug right at the end of the last cutscene of the prologue. Now, you may be wondering, if that's the case, how am I able to continue to play Clair Obscure Expedition 33? Well, I have a solution for you. So, if you play Clair Obscure Expedition 33 on the Steam Deck, make sure that for the first time when you finish the prologue, just watch the cutscene all the way to the end, because it will play the cutscene all the way to the end, and then at that point it will crash, and when it crashes, just go back, reboot the game, and play the game all the way to the part where it starts the prologue, skip the prologue, and then after that you will be able to continue with the game. I know that is something that is a major inconvenience, and I hope they fix this bug, because this is something in which it is really annoying and it really disrupts the immersion of the gameplay. But all I'm saying is that I'm glad that it works, and there is no need to wait for a patch if you really want to continue playing on with the game. Now, before I talk about what I really love about Clair Obscure Expedition 33, as well as what I hope to look forward to as I continue playing the game, I will want to talk about some important general information that I believe you all should know, because this important general information is something in which I believe will be a deciding factor about whether or not this game is for you or you should look for a different game. So, one of the most important things I see in Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is that you don't have a map that you can access all the time. There is a map in the game where you can access, but you can only access it at a central hub where you are not currently exploring certain pathways, certain parts of the world. So that's something you have to keep in mind. If you are somebody who doesn't like these games where you have to potentially wander aimlessly and waste, a few minutes going off the path without noticing, and you have to come back and try to figure out where to go next. If you don't like these type of games, then Clair Obscure Expedition 33 probably is not for you. You might want to pass on this one if you are very annoyed by these type of games. But another thing that I will also want to cover is the items in the game, and I'm not talking about the items that you picked up. I'm talking about the items that are the resources that's given to you for you to use specifically during battle in order to assist other party members. I will say this, that you have to use the items very carefully, because from what I see, the only way to replenish those different items, again, I don't know, I haven't played throughout the game, I haven't beat the game, but so far, based on the many hours I played yesterday, as far as replenishing the resources for those items, they can only be replenished at rest spots or at camp. It is not something in which you can replenish along the way in your journey unless you find a rest spot or you camp out. It is something in which you have to use very sparingly and use it only at a time when you cannot do any other stuff. So that is something that I noticed is a tip for the game. The thing about this game is that it is something in which you really have to plan, you really have to strategize on how do you tackle the different obstacles. It is something in which it is not very lighthearted. I will say it is something in which if you know what you're doing, you can easily progress in the game. But if you don't know what you're doing, you could also die very quickly. There is no grace as far as not knowing what to do. Now, if after I shared all this general information that I believe is a make or break, and where you still feel that Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is a game that you definitely want to try out, that you're still intrigued by it, I want to share about some of the highlights, some of the things that I love about Clair Obscure Expedition 33. So, one of the things that I really love about this game is the way that they present the tutorials. The tutorials are extremely clear and easy to understand as long as you read it. It is something that's really easy to understand in my opinion, and I also really love how the rest points along the way, where you can choose different things in the rest points. You can choose to rest, which basically replenishes your health. You can also choose to upgrade the different attributes, learn different skills, as well as fast travel. What I really love about specifically the function of upgrading the attributes as well as learning the different skills is that the skill points are not shared. So if you use, let's say, 3 points for a character to learn more skills, it will not affect the other character's ability to acquire the different skills. I know some people, they don't like that. They feel like it will be less of a challenge, and I get it. But to me, it's makes it a bit easier, a bit more organized, and it also makes, playing the game a lot more fluid. But that's just my personal opinion. I know different people can agree to disagree. Now, another thing that I really love about Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is how they incorporate similar mechanics to other, turn-based games. Like, for example, in the game, as you go about approaching an enemy, it's really well advised that you strike first, because when you strike first, you will gain an advantage where you can attack the enemy first. Your party members will be able to go first in attacking the enemy, and that is something in which it is really cool because it reminds me of the Persona games. It reminds me of Metaphor. It is something in which I was a bit familiar before when playing those other turn-based JRPG games. That is something in which I like, where there are some things that are similar, where I don't have to completely relearn about it myself, but there are also other aspects in which I need to learn, in which it is unique in the game. What I find really interesting with Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is their ability points. At first, before playing the game, I thought that the ability points were basically the same thing with other turn-based JRPG games where they have magic points, the MP. I thought that it is something in which it will literally drain all the way to 0, and where it carries over to the next battle and you have to use it sparingly. If you run out of those MP, you're actually in great danger, because unless you find ways to replenish the MP, there is no way you can use the more powerful attacks. You will have to stick with your basic attacks. Now, as far as Clair Obscure Expedition 33 goes, the action points, they don't carry over from battle to battle. The thing about the action points is that it has a fixed number of action points at the start of a battle for each character, so don't need to worry about using up your action points for a battle. It will replenish on the next battle. And another thing that I really find that's really cool about the AP as well is that it actually rewards you for doing the basic attacks. When you do a basic attack, you will earn AP, and that is something I find really fascinating as well, because you don't have to constantly worry about having the lack of AP, aka action points. Now, another thing that I really love about Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is the extra things that you get to do other than fighting the different enemies. As you go about roaming in the game, roaming around in those different areas, there are these things called paint cages, where you look around in the environment and you get to shoot certain flashy objects, and where they will help open up the cage where you can get the loot that is bound by the cage. And another thing that I really love about the game is that when you go about throughout the different areas, there are periodically those merchants where you can buy items, and where some items may be hidden, where you have to duel them in order to unlock a secret item, which in my opinion it is totally worth it, because the secret item is usually something that is rewarded for dueling and beating the specific merchant. That is something that I find really interesting, and as well as I also really love that there are also journals along the way, and where you can listen to the beautiful voiceover from past expeditionists. It is something that I find is just really cool, because as somebody who loves history, loves story, loves the lore in games, I like to be able to pick up these dialogues and understand what's going on, even though those characters are not the characters that are the ones that I control, the ones that I copied with on the adventure/expedition. I'm a very big fan about the story, the background, the history side of things in games, on top of the gameplay elements of it. So that is something in which I find is really cool. Now, another thing that I also really love about Clair Obscure Expedition 33 are the spontaneous mini bosses that I get to encounter. The different mini bosses that I encounter, they each have like different things you have to watch out to make sure to overcome and clear the mini boss, and that is something that I find really interesting. You have to learn about their patterns so you know when to dodge, when to parry, when to jump. That is something that you want to make sure you don't take too much unnecessary damage. But another another thing that I really love about it as well is the variety of the different types of mini bosses. I mean, one mini boss I remembered was where I had struggles at first because the mini boss, he does 3 attacks that are massively hard and also really fast that at first I couldn't get the timing right on when to dodge or when to parry. I obviously later on figured it out and beat the mini boss. You need to learn how to adapt, and if you don't adapt, then you die. That is something in which I find really fascinating. And another example of another mini boss that I will say that I find really interesting as well is the mini boss where he actually chews up your party members periodically, and that is something I find really interesting because you ought to be really careful and on your toes at all times with the battle, because you have to keep in mind that the party member can potentially be gone even without losing all the health, and I find it something that is much worse when it's eaten up, because if it is just your party member dies and you planned well, you can hypothetically use an item to revive the party member, but if he eats you up, you're stuck with the remaining party members. You cannot revive the party member that's already eaten up, that's swallowed by the enemy. So that is something that I find really interesting. There is a variety of different mini bosses that I find interesting to tackle, and so that is something that I find really, really awesome and really, really engaging. Now, as far as Clair Obscure Expedition 33 goes, it is safe to say that I am really invested in the game. I really am interested in the bond of the different characters, because you have a character that is in her teens, but you also have the different characters that are in their 30s or 40s. That is something that I find really interesting, because for me personally, I love multi-generational friends. I love to have friends that are younger than me. I love to have friends that are older. I feel like there is some value that I can pour to people that are younger, people that are older, but I can also learn from people that are older as well as people that are younger. There are these different things that everybody in those different ages can encourage and build each other up, and I'm somebody who is just really interested to see, as I continue on with the game, progressing the story, to see how well these characters will bond, how well these characters will complement each other. And I will say this, is that so far in the game, there are some parts of it in which I feel like it will bring about an amazing story. Again, I don't know, I haven't finished the game, so all I can say it's all based on the interactions with the characters so far. Now, I won't give you any spoilers, don't worry, but I'll leave you with a quote that I found really interesting. The quote that I want to emphasize is from this character that said, "Contentment is the highest form of happiness." Now, that is something in which I will say it resonates with me, because contentment, at the end of the day, being happy with my own life, being happy with where I'm at, not worrying about what other people think, not worrying about how other people's lives are playing out compared to my life at a similar type of age, that is something in which brings about the high self-esteem. It brings about the confidence in me that where I don't have to be someone else, I don't have to compare, I just have to be Joe Wang. Now, I'm not saying to not improve in my life. There are definitely people that I can learn in order to make me grow and develop and become a better person, but all I'm saying is that I don't compare with other people's success. I do my best, and that's all that matters. There are other great quotes that I didn't mention that I stumbled across, but I have confidence that there will be more great quotes as I continue on with the game. But yeah, guys, what do you think about Clair Obscure Expedition 33? Is it a game in which you are excited to want to play, or is it a game in which you think that it is not for you? We'd love to discuss in the comment section below. And as always, if you love gaming lists, gaming reviews, gaming discussions, and everything related to the Steam Deck, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe so you'll not miss another video. I try to post Mondays and Fridays around 6 p.m. Pacific time, so stay tuned. Once again, my name is Joe Wang from the Nomadic Gaming Guild, and game on!